Do you know who my father is? He owns half the city. I can have your badge by tomorrow morning." Those were the exact words spoken by 23-year-old Madison Thornton as she sat in her luxury SUV, looking down at a police officer who had just saved lives by pulling her over. She didn't see a public servant. She didn't see a hero. She saw a nobody who was standing in the way of her afternoon plans. Madison thought her family's $400 million empire was a shield. She thought her father's political connections made her invisible to the law. But today, she isn't in her father's boardroom. Today, she is in courtroom 3A, and the man sitting in the high chair isn't impressed by her bank account. Today, Madison Thornton is about to find out that in the eyes of Judge Frank Caprio, a billionaire's daughter and a street sweeper stand on the exact same ground. Elmwood is more than just a collection of streets on a map of Providence. It is a community built on decades of trust. On this particular August 15th, the sun was casting long, warm shadows across the Victorian porches that lined the neighborhood. The air was filled with the sounds of a typical summer afternoon. The distant hum of a lawnmower, the laughter of children riding their bicycles on the sidewalks of Haskins Avenue, and the quiet chatter of neighbors. 72-year-old Dorothy Henderson, a woman who had spent 35 years of her life teaching at Hope High School, was stepping off the curb. She wasn't worried. Why should she be? She was in her home. She was heading across the street to visit her friend Margaret, just like she had done thousands of times before. But at exactly 4:30 p.m., the atmosphere changed from a peaceful summer day to a scene of impending tragedy. The silence wasn't just broken. It was decimated by the mechanical shriek of a 500-horsepower engine, a 2024 white Range Rover Sport. A machine worth over $120,000 was tearing through the narrow residential corridor. This wasn't a driver accidentally going 30 in a 25 zone. This was a pilot of a 3-ton luxury tank pushing 70 miles per hour. That is nearly 3 times the legal limit. In the time it takes to blink, that vehicle was covering over 100 feet of pavement. Behind the wheel was Madison Elizabeth Thornton. To her, the speedometer wasn't a warning. It was a challenge. She wasn't thinking about the families of Elmwood. She wasn't thinking about the elderly residents who have earned the right to feel safe on their own doorsteps. In her mind, she was protected by a $400 million family name. She believed that the rules governing the common people of Providence, the hard-working teachers like Mrs. Henderson or the mail carriers like Mr. Chun, simply didn't apply to a Thornton. As she tore past Haskins Avenue, the displacement of air was so violent it rattled the windows of the nearby homes. Mrs. Henderson had to literally jump back onto the curb to avoid being pulverized by the white blur. Madison didn't even notice. She didn't see the terror in the eyes of the parents who grabbed their children off the grass. To Madison, Elmwood wasn't a neighborhood where people lived. It was just a shortcut she was entitled to use as her personal racetrack, no matter who was in her way. When Officer Daniel Martinez saw that white blur scream past him at 70 miles per hour, he didn't see a rich girl or a CEO's daughter. He saw a deadly threat. Officer Martinez is an 18-year veteran of the Providence Police Department, a man who has spent nearly 2 decades of his life patrolling these streets, protecting these families, and seeing exactly what happens when metal meets bone at high speeds. He knew that if he didn't stop that Range Rover immediately, his next call wouldn't be for a traffic stop. It would be for a coroner. With his sirens wailing and his heart pounding, he finally managed to bring the luxury SUV to a halt at the intersection of Cranston Street and Haskins Avenue. As he stepped out of his patrol car, he followed the protocol he had practiced thousands of times. He expected a terrified teenager. He expected someone who had realized their grave mistake and was ready to apologize through tears. But as he approached the driver's side window, the air didn't smell like regret. It smelled like pure, unadulterated entitlement. Madison Thornton didn't even have the decency to put down her iPhone. She didn't roll the window down more than a few inches, as if the very air Officer Martinez breathed was beneath her. She didn't look him in the eye. She was too busy staring at her reflection in the screen. When Officer Martinez, ever professional, asked that standard, fundamental question, "Ma'am, do you know why I pulled you over?" he wasn't met with an answer. He was met with a chilling, mocking laugh. "Do you know who my father is?" She sneered. her voice dripping with a venom that comes only from a life without consequences. He owns half the city. I can have your badge by tomorrow morning. Think about that for a moment. This public servant, a man with 18 years of service, was being threatened for doing his job, for saving her life and the lives of the neighbors she had just endangered. But Madison wasn't done. She didn't just threaten him. She decided to turn the encounter into a spectacle for her 47,000 Instagram followers. She began live-streaming the officer, pointing her camera at his badge, mocking his uniform, and calling him a rent-a-cop and a power-tripping nobody. She sat there in a $120,000 vehicle, laughing in the face of the law, convinced that her father's $400 million bank account made her untouchable. She didn't see a father, a husband, or a veteran officer. In her twisted reality, Officer Martinez was just an inconvenience, a minor speed bump in her afternoon. She was so blinded by her own arrogance that she couldn't see the truth, that this nobody was the only person in the world who cared enough about the community to stop her before she became a killer. She thought she was filming his downfall, but in reality, she was recording the very evidence that would lead to her own. The moment Madison Thornton pulled that white Range Rover back into the gated driveway of her family's estate, she didn't feel regret. She didn't feel a sense of shame for the lives she had nearly ended on Cranston Street. No, she felt insulted. She felt that a nobody in a blue uniform had dared to inconvenience her. And in the Thornton household, when you're inconvenienced, you don't apologize, you make a phone call. But the story doesn't end at the roadside. As soon as Madison got home, the massive, cold machinery of generational wealth began to turn. Her father, Robert Thornton, the CEO of Thornton Industries, didn't act like a father concerned for his daughter's soul. He didn't sit her down and scold her for going 70 miles per hour in a 25-mile-per-hour zone. He didn't take away the keys to that $120,000 vehicle. Instead, he did what he had spent his entire career doing. He reached for his phone to call his friends in high places. In the weeks leading up to this trial, the quiet chambers of Judge Caprio became a battlefield of influence. This wasn't just one phone call. It was a coordinated campaign to bury the truth. Judge Caprio's office received 7 distinct phone calls from individuals who believed they owned the city of Providence. We are talking about city councilmen like James Patterson from Ward 3. We are talking about Samuel Rodriguez, the president of the Providence Chamber of Commerce. Even high-priced attorneys from the most prestigious firms on Westminster Street were knocking on the door. They all had the same script. They all whispered the same poisonous suggestions. Can we make this go away, Judge? She's a good kid from a good family. She just had a momentary lapse in judgment. They tried to paint a picture of a misunderstood girl rather than the arrogant driver who mocked a veteran officer. And then came the ultimate insult to the bench, the offer of a donation. They suggested that perhaps a $50,000 or even a $75,000 contribution to the Providence Youth Foundation or the Police Benevolent Association might make this unfortunate incident disappear from the records. They thought justice had a price tag. They looked at the judicial system and saw a vending machine where you could insert enough cash to receive a not guilty verdict. They truly believed that because Robert Thornton's company owned 17 commercial properties in downtown Providence, his daughter was immune to the consequences of her actions. But they made one fatal mistake. They forgot who was sitting in that chair. They didn't realize that for 32 years, since 1992, Judge Frank Caprio has been building a wall of integrity, a wall that no amount of money, no matter how many zeros are in the bank account, can climb. While the Thorntons were busy counting their commercial developments, the judge was thinking about the Hendersons, the Colemans, and the families who actually live in the neighborhoods Madison treated like a racetrack. Robert Thornton thought he was making a deal. In reality, he was only proving to the judge that this family believed they were truly above the law. Now, look at Madison Thornton in the courtroom today. She's 23 years old, a graduate of Boston University, standing there in her designer clothes with a team of expensive lawyers by her side. On paper, she has everything a person could ever dream of: wealth, education, and a future paved with gold. But as Judge Caprio looks down from the bench, he isn't looking at her expensive attire or her father's $400 million valuation. He is looking into her heart, and what he sees, there's a chilling, hollow void where remorse should be. The judge stares at the police report, and his blood runs cold. Because the most shocking part of this case isn't just the 70 miles per hour on August 15th. It's what happened next. Just 3 days later, less than 72 hours after being pulled over and warned by Officer Martinez, Madison was caught again. Same white Range Rover. Same license plate. Tango Hotel 4582. Same reckless. Deadly speed through the exact same Elmwood neighborhood. It was as if that first citation meant nothing. To Madison, that ticket wasn't a warning. It was just a souvenir, a minor annoyance that her father's lawyers would eventually fix. The courtroom falls into a heavy, suffocating silence as Judge Caprio removes his glasses. He leans forward, his voice quiet, almost a whisper, but it carries the devastating weight of a sledgehammer hitting stone. I've sat in this chair since 1992. The judge says, his eyes locked onto Madison's. In those 32 years, I've seen just about every kind of person. I've seen mothers who stole a loaf of bread because their children hadn't eaten in 2 days. I've shown them mercy. I've seen teenagers who made a stupid mistake, and they stood where you are now, shaking and cried because they knew they had disappointed their parents and endangered their neighbors. I gave them second chances because I saw their humanity. But you, the judge's voice hardens. You didn't cry for 72-year-old Mrs. Henderson, who had to jump for her life to avoid your car. You didn't worry about the children on Haskins Avenue. No, you went home and laughed. You went on Instagram and mocked a veteran officer to your 47,000 followers. You didn't worry about the lives you almost shattered. You only worried about your social media metrics and your father's reputation. You think your name puts you above the law. But in this courtroom, Madison, names don't matter. Only actions do. The atmosphere in courtroom 3A becomes suffocating. You could hear a pin drop on the marble floor as the high-priced defense attorneys from a Morrison legal group looked down at their mahogany tables. They had argued for leniency, claiming a jail sentence would ruin the bright future of a Boston University graduate. They wanted a slap on the wrist, a $3,000 fine that Madison's father could pay with the spare change in his pocket. They thought they could negotiate with justice. But Judge Caprio leans over the bench, his eyes like steel. Compassion without accountability is not compassion, he declares, his voice echoing through the chamber. It's enabling. If I let you walk out of here with mere fine, I am sending a message to every wealthy person in Rhode Island that they have a license to kill our citizens as long as their checkbook is thick enough. I am telling the families in Elmwood that their lives are worth less than your father's commercial properties. Not today. Not in this courtroom. Then he delivers the hammer blow. For the reckless driving on August 15th, 90 days. For the arrogant attempt to intimidate Officer Martinez, 60 days. And for the repeat offense just 72 hours later, another 90 days. He orders them to be served consecutively. Total, 240 days. 8 months in the women's division of the adult correctional institution. The gasps of shock from Madison's family fill the room, but the judge isn't finished. He imposes a maximum $15,000 fine and strips her of her driving privilege for 3 full years. And when you aren't behind bars, he adds, you will spend 200 hours in a trauma center. You will look into the eyes of victims who are paralyzed and broken by drivers exactly like you. You will see the real human cost of your hurry. The billionaire's daughter, who thought she owned the city, is led away in handcuffs, learning finally that the law doesn't care about your last name. As a metallic click of the handcuffs echoes through the silent courtroom, the reality finally crashes down on Madison Thornton. Her face, once flushed with arrogance, turns a ghostly, ashen pale. For the first time in her 23 years, the $400 million Thornton empire has failed her. The high-priced lawyers, the political phone calls, and the family prestige have all dissolved into nothingness against the unwavering integrity of Judge Frank Caprio. She isn't a somebody today. She is a defendant being remanded into custody. Judge Caprio leans forward, looking not just at Madison, but at the cameras, delivering a message that resonates far beyond the walls of courtroom 3A. To the parents watching this, he says with a heavy heart, teach your children that respect is earned, not bought with father's checkbook. Teach them that every police officer, every neighbor, every human being deserves dignity. If you fail to teach them these lessons in the safety of your home, the world will teach them in the cold reality of a prison cell. And by then, the price of the lesson might be too high. Madison will walk out of the ACI in August of 2025. She will still have her youth, her wealth, and her degree. But Judge Caprio's final hope is that she leaves behind her entitlement. He has given her 8 months to realize that her most valuable asset isn't a white Range Rover or a famous last name. It is her character. Because in the end, justice isn't just about punishment. It's about the hope that a shattered life can be rebuilt with the foundations of humility and respect. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about a wake-up call that saved a life. Thank you for watching the Justice Files. If you believe that the law should apply to everyone equally, hit the subscribe button and join our community. Every case tells a story. Every verdict brings us closer to the truth. Until next time, stay safe and stay just.